around strategic initiatives within the SA business and a review of some of the line items. Maybe if you can comment on network as a service. It seems you have missed some of your ambition 2025 targets you set almost 5 years ago. Can we expect a review of your wholesale roaming agreements with Telkom and Cell C? And then I guess the third question is, you specifically mentioned scaling of FWA and FTTH in SA. I guess how will this be achieved, organically or inorganically? Thank you.
Thanks. 4 questions from one person. Louise, a 4 question special. Should we answer that?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Rolf.
Yeah, I mean, let's frame the guidance. I'll give it another go at this. So at the service revenue, we said that we're just widening the lower end of the range to reflect realistically where we are today. We're 2.3. But as we compete, for sure we're pushing towards. And on the margin side, what we're basically saying is that we're going to put a bit more investment into kind of on the distribution end. So for example, and we've already done that, we've changed ongoing commission, the so-called OGR. Our OGR levels are lower than Vodacom and Telkom, okay? So we said to Charles, please go ahead, just look at OGR in terms of the distribution. You all understand how the distribution structures work in South Africa, so we're the lowest OGR. So if somebody else is offering you a higher OGR as you're a dealer, and MTN is number 3, that can't keep us competitive, even though we're trying to protect margins. So we're pushing, we're investing a bit more at the dealer and at the distribution end in South Africa. I think you'll start to see that come through. So the lower end of the range is saying we are showing reality. Because if I said to you, Louise, we're doing 4 to 6, I haven't showed that today, have I? Okay, so let's just lower that range, but the top remains. So let us see how these costs of sales investments improve our market shares, yes or no. So we're still aspiring for healthy market share. We still aspire for 30 to 35% of all net additions in the market. That aspiration has not changed. We're just wanting to be realistic around the competitive dynamics that we're seeing. So there's a lot of work around, let's say, distribution, around devices. The device strategy is quite granular. We have device partners who are bringing devices and attaching the SIM, and we don't have the cost of that, but we're also investing in devices. So our aspirations remain around maintaining or actually growing market share, other than not the other way around, to be clear. I think the other point, and you must remind me because you had 4 questions. What was the second question again? Sorry?
Network as a service.
Network as a service. Look, I mean, network as a service, my discussion with Charles, and this discussion will now move from Charles to Ferdy and Yolanda, is I think we have to think about the dynamics of an SA market in terms of MVNOs. South Africa right now, if you think about it strategically and you step back, there are 2 fully invested networks in MTN and Vodacom, 2 fully invested networks, okay? High quality and all of that. Telkom, with respect, have portion of their network, and then they roam a little bit on us and on Vodacom, okay? And then you have these MVNOs are coming on, the banks, etc. So I'm not disappointed that we're missing that target, because actually, if we don't think about it strategically long term, you're putting all this Capex and you're having all these MVNOs a bit like OTTs. They don't put the Capex in, but they can go and give you much cheaper data than you yourself, the generator of that data, who's got the cost of production, can. So I'm very happy to miss that, because ultimately you could find yourself where Europe found itself. Go and look at the Netherlands, okay? You look at the Netherlands, 10, 15 years ago, the MVNOs wrecked the market on retail pricing. So Charles missing that, that's okay. You can mark me as red, but strategically, if we're not thinking about it, so we will go and look for the retail business, but we have a walkaway point where the pricing does not have sufficient headroom at the cost of production. We say, hey, Charles, just leave it, okay? We're not gonna, that strategically, you need to understand that's how we're thinking about it. because if you're not careful, you'll have a Netherlands effect. Jens, our former colleague, saw that happen live when he was in Vodafone Europe. So on that point, I need to share some of the questions with Tsulu. Tsulu, which of those two remaining questions you want to take?
Which one was there?
It was.
We'll ask Louise to repeat them. The second two. I think those FWA.
Oh, the FWA, I can pick that one.
Yeah.
So let me finish on the FWA. Look, I mean, we'll push on the FWA. We have spectrum, as long as we have sufficient spectrum and we can, get the quality almost fiber-like to a home, we'll do that. We're looking at the outdoor units, how they can help us with spectral efficiency. That will invest to the extent that, unlike Nigeria, where they have 100 megahertz of 3500 spectrum, we don't have as much. But between the 2600 and 35, we'll make a plan. And then FTTH, FTTH, in our view, and we've been consistent, so we won't make it up, that FTTH, medium to long term, there must be some sort of consolidation opportunity that will come in one way or the other. We're not going to be allocating capital. We're going to have a fiber overbuild in this country before you know it. So, that's kind of our position. But FWA, and you saw, Charles and team have really pushed. Home was one of our highlights for the period. So we'll continue to invest in that way.
Yeah, so just in the interest of efficiency, there are a couple of questions that were covered by Louise's question, but just to dovetail on that, and maybe a question for Tsulu, do you expect Capex to sales, this is South Africa, to decrease significantly in the midterm given the guidance that was provided? And then back to Ralph, the second question, how do you think about pricing in South Africa in terms of your medium-term guidance outlook? So just on Capex to sales.
I think the Capex is 12.6% now. We will obviously review relative to, the revised guidance, what is the acceptable range. It will definitely be below the 15 to 18% that we guided at group. We think obviously it will be, below that initially, but we'll obviously go through the business planning process now and just firm up the numbers, and we'll communicate later on in the year.
Yeah, I think on the pricing side in SA, you've got to think about it prepaid, postpaid. Postpaid, the pricing regime has been quite clear. There's annual, and the market's quite comfortable with that. It looks more like developed markets kind of pricing. And on the prepaid side, I think, we took a step which we believe is the right, medium to long-term one, is that even on the prepaid side, you have to price up to reflect the inflationary costs as you see prepaid pricing up in other markets. So we'll still continue. Pricing in the prepaid is obviously, quite granular. My town offers, all of those kind of things. So you can't have a general statement on it. But I think the direction of travel over the medium term is you do need to pass some of the inflation onto the customers, because obviously there's a big Capex that needs to be financed there.
Thanks, Rolf. Just checking on the hands, Myron.
You've got a big voice, we can hear you.
No, for the broadcast.
Thank you. It's Myron Rajaratnam from MUPFA. A question on capital intensity. Many of your major opcos are sort of guiding medium-term Capex is coming down, the intensity is coming down. What gives you the confidence that this is happening? Is it the technology is getting better? Is it getting cheaper because it's open source or something like that? Or is it the fact that you are now better endowed with spectrum than previously? Is it a mixture of these things? There's something else? Maybe some thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, our framework has been clear. At a group level, we see 18 to 15. So the direction of travel is down towards 15 over the medium term is what you need to think about. I guess there's a combination of factors that are market specific, so you can't make a general statement. In a market like Nigeria's example, lots of spectrum. They've got a good spectrum estate, but we're also pushing FTTH in Nigeria. So there's a big race to own the home in Nigeria, and we are taking a FWA and FTTH approach. Big clusters in Ikoyi, there we're putting fiber. FWA, kind of elsewhere. So Nigeria's dynamic will be different from Ghana. Ghana, they don't have 5G spectrum, so they're putting a lot of fiber. So they have very little FWA, they're putting fiber because the 3500 spectrum has not been made available. So you have to look at market by market, but if you aggregate it, I think the direction is down as a function of spectrum, and also the technology actually is improving capacity. There are these things called massive MIMO. So some of our OEMs provide technology that helps boost capacity with the same RAN network. So there are multiple factors, but I think the main thing is the direction of travel is kind of your 18 to 15. We're at a bit higher end. I think some of our peers are much low, but we're saying that's because where we are, we're still seeing growth.
Thanks. I was just checking in the room again if there are hands. Okay, just maybe a few questions from the webcast. Maybe a question here that covers a few relating to the DOJ investigation. Can you provide more color on the DOJ investigation? Does it relate to the same issues as the ATA cases, Anti-Terrorism Act cases? What sort of information has the DOJ requested, and can you give us what are the next steps?
Yeah, I mean, we were as comprehensive as we can be with this kind of investigation. So through our lawyers, there was a request for the information, and we said we would collaborate. The request for information is related to our previous market of Afghanistan for prior years and Iran. So that has been their request. We are talking to them. They have not accused us of any wrongdoing. And that's as far as we can disclose to you right now, because anything else, to your point around, is it related to this? That would be speculation. So we won't go into that speculation. I think the sense is very factual and complete.
Thanks, Ralph. Some questions for Tsulu. In light of the significant increase in operating free cash flow, as well as the commentary around Nigeria generating positive equity quicker than expected, how does the MTN management and the board think about share buybacks? Is there an opportunity to introduce buybacks in the second half of 2025, especially given the recent sell-off of the stock price? I think that's today's sell-off.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that always comes up. And I think we've always said, for us, we see, share buyback as, a sustainable thing. We don't believe it's something that we should do once off. But we really engaged with the board in terms of, what is the best way in terms of retaining, returns to shareholders. And it is one of the things that we are looking at. It's certainly number 5 on our priority list, not number 3. But we're doing work, and we will communicate, at the end of the year in terms of how we think about sustainable glide path for returns to shareholders. Yeah,
just to build on to Tsulu's comment, I did elaborate a little bit on how we think about the batting order for reduction of debt. As we assess where Nigeria comes out and its ability to repatriate, that whole batting order we'll have to review. And, where do we have share buybacks? Today, as we said at the bottom, I think in time when we look, we will look holistically at orders and when one would do back. We're not close to them, let's be clear to stakeholders, but for now it remains there because we're allocating capital to the top, principally the top 3 in terms of organic growth, debt reduction, and dividend payments.
I think just on the point, there's another question. So funding plans for the Euro bonds, how do you think about the expiry from next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did cover it in my presentation. So we are doing some work. We've always said that we want to, settle the bonds or reduce them to a de minimis balance. These, the last one, 2026, expires next year. So we will communicate as appropriate before the end of this financial year.
Thanks, Tsulu. Question on some other markets. Will you get inflationary price increases in Nigeria and Ghana over the next year?
I can't say that. I'm not God. So I think we have the continuing discussions with the authorities around inflation. So I think what you need to take into is the process we go through. So we have discussed in Nigeria the need to be able to pass on inflation. We've got the 50%. The process of tariff increases in Nigeria is actually regulated and in the Act. So the Act has to change. The NCA Act has to change. But those dialogues are ongoing, and I guess when we make a development. In Ghana, we're already in a process multi-years. Because of our SMP regulation, we are defined as dominant in Ghana, and therefore we can't push pricing down to enable the number 2 and number 3 to operate. And we've had sequential years of being able to pass on pricing quite effectively. So, I mean, there are no concerns really around Ghana. I guess the focus in Nigeria, Carl, Modupe, and I am, they'll be focused on the engagements at an industry level to have much more formulaic tariff adjustment regime in Nigeria.
Thanks. I was just checking in the room if there's another hand. Yeah.
Thanks. A question for Shulu. Your expense efficiency program is going well, but right now you're seeing good top-line growth, and maybe it's normal for companies to take their foot off their pedal when it comes to expense efficiency when revenue growth is coming in bundles of growth, right? So how do we make sure that the expense efficiency program is still stuck to by the MTNs?
Yeah, so gosh, it's quite a rigorous program. I always have to thank all the MTNs for all the efforts that they make, because we're really on top of it on an ongoing basis. And I think if I use Ralph's analogy, it's like, nails that are growing, you always have to prune them just to make sure that they're not sticking out. So we believe that, expense efficiencies, even when you're doing well, has to be an ongoing focus, and really looking at the more structural and sustainable savings. So we're comfortable with the work that we're doing now. I mean, the renegotiation of leases in Nigeria and other markets, renegotiation with other vendors. There's still work that we need to do on IT commissioning. We started the work, we're continuing the sales and distribution commission structure. So it's an ongoing initiatives in our view that we need to continue to be at.
Yeah, it's in people's KPIs. That's what helps.
Thanks, Tsulu. Back to South Africa. Can you explain why SA wholesale revenue has been slower? Is it not benefiting from the rapid expansion of the likes of Capitec Connect and Cell C's roaming agreement with MTN?
Yeah, look, I mean, the wholesale, as I said, it's predominantly Cell C. I think the Cell C, the roaming revenue we're getting is pretty much what we expected. There's nothing there to see, and we're pretty happy with the work Charles and team have done to stabilize the Cell C relationship. There were times in the past we're talking about revenue recognition for Cell C. So Cell C, Telkom, I mean, I guess we're getting a decent share. We'd always want, a little bit more on the rev share there. And, Capitec sit on top of Cell C. They're not directly with us. So that is an economic arrangement between Cell C and Capitec. We are kind of the wholesaler, so we don't see, all that's coming through there. But the total traffic that is going through to wholesale, Charles, remind me it's about 25% of your total network? Yeah, and stayed pretty much the same, that 25% of the petabytes that we have in the markets are going to kind of on the wholesale. So it stayed pretty stable. We haven't seen anything that's shot out in terms of demands there. That's why you see the revenue profile also being pretty steady. We're not getting more petabytes for lower revenue there.
Thanks, Ralph. Just another question on SA. I think you touched on it earlier, but it's quite specific on SA Prepaid. What are you going to be doing to accelerate SA Prepaid going forward? And are you able to give a comment on how the Eastern Cape floods impacted your network there, particularly in prepaid?
Yeah, let me answer that one. Obviously the floods, let me start, would have been a factor that affected kind of all. And, we look at our prepaids, almost on a kind of weekly basis, and we saw the dip. Obviously because, people can't get to sites and fix them because it's difficult. I think it's a dynamic that would have affected, kind of us more generally. I mean, on the prepaid side, as I said, in terms of the medium-term guidance adjustment, we're going to put a bit more investment onto the distribution side to drive that top-line growth. That's why you see the margin impact that we think will be there in the near term. So you're going to have to take that fight to the market, commissions, distribution, etc. It's the nature of the market that we have in South Africa. So that's what will help us. Products, Charles has done a fantastic job to kind of prune the product portfolio, town offers, looking regional offers, etc. They're pretty much in good shape. The CVM engines are working well in terms of offers. The big issue is at the distribution end, because pretty much we have the leading network quality, huh? So there's nothing wrong with the network. Charles and team have done a fantastic job on network and network resilience. So that can't be an issue. And we put Capex, moderate Capex, still have very high levels of availability. So it's that distribution. And what happens in South Africa, which doesn't happen anywhere else, is between the MNO and the customer, there's a whole distribution infrastructure that sits there. So what you call prepaid is not really prepaid because there's somebody in the middle. In many ways, prepaid is postpaid in South Africa. It's prepaid everywhere else. So that distribution is where it is, and then you look at the competitive intensity. A couple of provinces, that's where we know, we've kind of said there are 2 provinces where that intensity is very, very strong. So we'll respond. We will respond, and that's why we're guiding kind of the margin coming down, because we're putting the cost of sales. OGR, let's make our OGR more competitive, because there's a bit of a gap. And then commissions, and I think that will drive the top line.
Thanks, Ralph. Just a question for Tsulu. Overall Capex across your opcos, the intensity was quite high in half one. Are you front-loading Capex, or are you expecting to have a Capex heavy year in 2025, which will impact your free cash flow generation?
Yeah, I think we indicated that we front-loaded MTN Nigeria specifically, but we see an easing off in particular in Nigeria, probably in the second half, and that should improve the free cash flow generation. However, overall, we've actually increased our guidance in total for the year. We said 33 to 38 billion rand, and part of that was obviously also accounting for the impacts of FX translation on a reported basis. Yeah.
Thanks, Tsulu. And there's a question here on 5G. I'm not sure if it's market specific. Let's just talk about it in terms of the group context. How do you think about 5G rollout and how it'll impact the business going forward?
Look, we'll deploy 5G where it makes sense. I don't think we have an approach where we want to cover the whole country in 5G. 4G is a very good technology, huh? And actually, it's almost, to be able to discern between 4G and 5G, unless you're a machine, it's actually quite difficult, huh? So, but we know 5G is important, so we'll deploy it selectively where we think we can monetize it. 4G is, obviously in 4G, in many of our markets, we're coming to a peak of coverage. So it will be selective and deployed where we think we can monetize it. You won't find a 5G national coverage. It's too much investment in terms of how you'll be able to monetize that. So we'll be quite selective and actually focus it on FWA. So where we see the FWA opportunity, we have sufficient spectrum. We say that's how we'll attack the home. So, but it goes kind of market by market. You also have, obviously 2600 and other bands that can help you with this. So it's not just exclusively kind of the conventional 5G frequencies.
And then just maybe related to that, it's a question which is, again, I think strategic and financial. How do you think about Capex and Capex intensity with the growing entrance of Starlink and other LEO providers into your markets?
Yeah, I think it's early days yet. We are striking up partnerships where they make sense. We spoke about Zambia, etc. There's a need there. If you look at the geography of Zambia, it's a very sparsely populated country, hilly and so forth. So a partnership with a non-terrestrial operator makes an absolute amount of sense. But the way we think about it is that with non-terrestrial networks, there are quite compelling partnership opportunities. We know we'll compete in parts, but we haven't had the thought process that that should influence Capex. We still see this glide path 15 to 18 over time. We're not putting any satellites up, but we will look at partnerships. Backhaul is almost a no-brainer case, particularly in some of the jurisdictions. But then in some jurisdictions, it won't make sense. But it shouldn't be influencing the way we think about Capex intensity.
Thanks, Ralph. As we wind up, just checking if there's a last question in the room. Otherwise, we can. Just a reminder that you can get some refreshments after this call. We will be seeing quite a few of you over the next few weeks in terms of the Results Roadshow. So you've got the opportunity to ask questions there. And if you do have questions in the meantime, please do contact us in the Investor Relations team. Ralph, I'll give you the last word.
No, thanks very much for taking the time to spend with Tule and I and Tato and the broader management team. We have Charles here, Ferdy and Dineo, Salom is here, Kolekile, the leadership team of MTN are also here. We're pretty pleased with what we've done in H1. We're seeing that momentum being with us. The macro we can't control, but if the macro stays kind of more broadly the same, I think you should anticipate a similar kind of performance because we see and feel the momentum that we have operationally in the business. So thanks very much. And as Tato said, many of you will see on the roadshow over the next couple of weeks, both South Africa and internationally. Yeah, and any further questions you have Tato's number and WhatsApp. You can get to him very quickly. Thank you very much.
Email, please.
Thank you.
Thanks.